Good morning. I'm glad you can devote some time to worship this weekend. I hope that the season of Advent has begun well for you this time of the 4 Sundays before Christmas that we prepare for the coming of Christ. This year, we are using one of the three approaches to focusing on the coming of Christ. And in general, there are three approaches that you can take to Advent. You can look back to the coming of Christ back in previous days. You can look at the ways that Christ comes to be in his church today, and you can look at the ways that Christ will come again. And that's that third approach that we're using for preaching. This month, we're using the prophet Isaiah to help us do this. And as you may have noticed, Christmas is on a Sunday. And so both Shalbina and Monroe City will be doing what followers of Jesus do on Sunday. We'll be getting together to worship at our usually scheduled times, though I am going to request we need to have hot chocolate. I will gladly be here on Sunday morning, 9 at Monroe City, 10:30 at Shalbina, but I do find that homemade hot chocolate really does help when you're getting together on Christmas Day. So the reading for this day comes out of the book of the prophet Isaiah, as I said, the 11th chapter. A shoot will come up from the stump of Jesse. From his roots a branch will bear fruit. The Spirit of the Lord will rest on him, the Spirit of wisdom and of understanding, the Spirit of counsel and of might, the Spirit of the knowledge and fear of the Lord, and he will delight in the fear of the Lord. He will not judge by what he sees with his eyes, or decide by what he hears with his ears, but with righteousness he will judge the needy. With justice he will give decisions for the poor of the earth. He will strike the earth with the rod of his mouth. With the breath of his lips he will slay the wicked. Righteousness will be his belt, and faithfulness the sash around his waist. The wolf will live with the lamb, the leopard will lie down with the goat, the calf and the lion and the yearling together, and a little child will lead them. The cow will feed with the bear, their young will lie down together, and the lion will eat straw like the ox. The infant will play near the cobra's den, and the young child will put its hand into the viper's nest. They will neither harm nor destroy on my holy mountain, for the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. In that day the root of Jesse will stand as a banner for the peoples. Nations will rally to him, and his resting place will be glorious. In that day the Lord will reach out his hand a second time to reclaim the surviving remnant of his people from Assyria, from Lower Egypt, Upper Egypt, from Cush, from Elam, from Babylonia, from Hamath, from the islands of the Mediterranean. He will raise a banner for the nations and gather the exiles of Israel. He will assemble the scattered people of Judah from the four quarters of the earth. This is the word of God for us, the people of God. Thanks be to God. When Julius Caesar came to Britain in the year 55 BC, he brought with him much that the people in Britain had never seen before. Roads that were built so well that they still are there today. Military formations and tactics that had never been seen in that part of the world. Food from across the entire Roman Empire that stretched from, Britain, or at that point, 55 BC, Britain all the way down into Africa, all the way over into what we now call the Middle East. So Julius Caesar brought food that they had never seen before. Rome was capable of conceiving and executing on plans that had not, just at a scale that had not been done in that part of the world before. They built things like Hadrian's Wall, a wall across the entire island to demarcate the northern limit of Roman authority and power. Right? So when Julius Caesar came to Britain, it changed Britain in some very dramatic fashions. If you listen to just about any history of Rome, you will hear about such things. The walls, the fortifications, the changes to governance. What you will probably not hear about is one of the most basic things that Rome brought with them, but one of the things that we sort of take for granted today. When Rome showed up in Britain in 55 BC and started building homes and aqueducts, controlling the water and how it is used, they brought with them a very crazy idea. They brought with them the toilet. Yes, This is when the toilet shows up in Britain. And then what happened is people got used to it. Indoor plumbing is something, if you don't have it, it sounds amazing. And once you do have it, it just kind of gets to be the thing you have. And that's what happened. People, generation after generation, had indoor plumbing and they loved it. And then a letter showed up, a fateful letter, a letter that would change the course of Britain for centuries to come. This letter showed up in 410 AD, written from Rome to the local government in Britain. A letter that is so consequential and so momentous that it has a name. It is the Look to Their Own Defenses letter. And you can guess what it does, right? It is the letter from Rome, who is at that point under the pressure of invasion from the Barbaroi, the barbarians, from sort of what we now call Germany, but it's not really Germany, but it's the area we now call Germany. They've come down from the north, and they are on the northern border of the Roman Empire, and this is getting to be a problem. And there's been some attempts to sort of like work out how can Rome and those people sort of interact. But it's hit the point in 410 AD that Rome is calling home all of the legions. It's calling home all of the military might. It is pulling back and consolidating so that it can try to hold on to the core, onto Italy. And so they send this letter, the Look to Their Own Defenses letter, which tells Britain that Rome is pulling out. And so they leave. They leave, and then Rome falls in 467 AD, and that's a whole different story. But this is focusing on Britain. We see that things start to change. When Rome pulls out, Britain's seat goes from being at the end of a long supply chain that stretched across a large empire to being what it was before Rome showed up. It became an island by itself. And it was no longer connected to this long supply chain, and so they no longer had the advantage of the foodstuffs that would come in from across the empire. They no longer had the advantage of the engineers who would come in and build the roads, and they no longer had the advantage of that very important thing to have if you want your toilet to keep on working: plumbers. They lost the expertise and the training necessary to maintain the Roman waterworks, the aqueducts, the plumbing. And so there came a moment after 410 AD when the last Roman toilet stopped working. And Britain did not have a toilet again for centuries. It is hard to pin down how long it took before Britain had a toilet again at all. I know that it's hard to pin down. What I could figure out was in 1858, there were no toilets in Britain because it was the year of what was called the Great Stink, which is just amazing. It has its own name, right? The Queen tried to go down the river Thames and on her boat and enjoy this ride, but after 5 minutes she had to go back because she just couldn't deal with it. And the papers reported on this. They had the printing presses, they could print on it, and then there were 3 great cholera epidemics in that year. And then that's what led to, if the Queen cannot take a joyride on her boat and we're having repetitive cholera epidemics, okay, I guess it's time to break down and invest in sewers. And that is when Britain invested in sewers and what we now think of as modern plumbing. And for the first time in 1,448 years, Britain had a toilet. A big moment. It was amazing for me to learn more about the history of this, because it reminded me that just because something is grand, majestic, or wonderful doesn't mean it will always continue to be so. Right? Whether it was the glory of Rome at the height of the Roman Empire, or whether it is the toilets of Britain, glorious and then gone. And this all came to mind as I was looking at the Davidic kingdom. the Davidic kings, right? As we read about, what we read in Isaiah is we read about the stump of Jesse. And that's what Jesse, that's that name, that's what that is referring to. The first kings of Israel happen, it's in 1 Samuel 8, when Israel demands a king. They want a king, and they are warned that the king will be just like any other person and will be tempted to greed. And if a king is tempted to greed, it does not go very well at all. And that if tempted, they would take their lands and crops and children, and you need to be wary of having a king. And the nation, the kingdom of Israel, says, yes, we still want a king. And the king started out well, the line of Jesse. Jesse is the father of David. David is the king of Israel. And he is the king after God's own heart, which does not mean that he is perfect, but it means that when he sins and falls short of the glory of God, he will repent, and he will change, and he will do better. Right? So King David, that's a good start, solid start. The line of Jesse begins with an excellent king. And then David's son Solomon, may not be as amazing of a king as he is remembered. That's a different sermon. And then David's grandson, Rehoboam, through his sheer arrogance, he fractures the kingdom into two. And then the Davidic kings, the line of Jesse, well, let's say it has its ups and it has its downs. By the time of the prophet Isaiah in the 8th century, 400 or so years later, when he is bringing the people of Israel word from God, it is clear that the tree of David, the tree of Jesse, right, the Davidic kingship was fallen. And as the kingship has fallen, it's being compared to a tree that's cut down. And once a tree is cut down, it tends to stay down. It tends to not grow back, right? Us, as we look to the future, we want to believe that we are preparing a better world for our children and grandchildren, and that tomorrow will be better than today because what we have done today. And this is often the case, but it isn't a given. It is what David would have hoped, and you don't know what will come next. Britain had toilets until it didn't, and then it didn't have toilets for centuries. Israel had a stable government under King David, a successful line of kings, David and then Solomon, and then it didn't, right? What's the phrase from any commercials that has to do with money that has that phrase? Past performance is no guarantee of future results, right? That's life. Like the trends are there, but past performance is no guarantee of future results. Figuring out something like how to make a toilet again, that is comparatively easy compared to bringing a tree back to life. But that is what we're looking at today, bringing a tree back to life. And we read in Isaiah, the stump of Jesse, right? There will be life from the stump of Jesse. There will be a sprout from the stump of Jesse. There's going to be something new that will come from a tree that was fallen. It will bear fruit again. And for this to happen, for a tree that's cut down to bear fruit again, it's going to take something beyond what we can do. It's going to take an act of God. And once God is involved, once more God is king in Israel, when we can say that is the case, like when this kingship is described in Isaiah as being wise and understanding, strong and knowledgeable. The king that is described as the king that is to come is described as being righteous and faithful, right? That he will strike the earth with the rod of his mouth, which is a pretty standard apocalyptic way of talking about how someone's words will strike people with such strength, with such power that it will change them, right? This is a way of talking about the final coming of the Messiah, when Christ will come again. It's further reinforced by the peace that we are told comes with this reign. The king, the stump of Jesse grows again, and the king comes, and the fruit that will be born of this is that there will be peace. The wolf will dwell with the lamb, the leopard with the young goat, the calf and the young lion, that the nursing child will play by the hole of a cobra, stick his hand in, and there not be any concern. This is describing a peace that does not yet exist. right? Talking about Jesus being the Prince of Peace. It comes up in multiple of the places that talks about who Jesus is. He's described as the Prince of Peace, and this is describing that peace, but it's describing the peace that is yet to come, because as is evidenced by the war in Ukraine, we're not there yet. We're just not, right? We hear it's in Isaiah 11 that the Lord will again recover for the second time with his hand the remnant of his people who will remain, gathering them from across the world, Assyria, Egypt, Pathros, Cush, Elam. Like, it goes through and talks about how this is like a second Exodus, that when the king comes again, that all of God's people will be gathered. And will be gathered, the dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth. And that the result of this time to come, when the shoot from the stump of Jesse grows again, when God again is king in Israel, then the jealousy of Ephraim will depart, and those who harass Judah will be cut off. That Ephraim will not be jealous of Judah, and Judah will not harass Ephraim. Right? Judah and Ephraim, or Judah and Israel, Ephraim being another name for the kingdom of Israel, will stop bickering and fighting each other. There'll be peace in the family. That's what it's talking about here. Ephraim and Judah are the 12 tribes of Israel. That there will be peace in the family when the king comes and gathers all of God's people together. And the lion will lie down with the lamb. Isn't that wonderful? But being even more potent, that the family will stop bickering amongst itself, right? To think about the peace that we want to have. Like, we all have tension in our lives in various places. The challenges that we have, where the tension in the family, the tension with other people, the tension, whatever it is in the community, like, to say that tensions and conflicts will be resolved, not because one person just gets their way from now on, but because there is genuine peace, the peace of God, the peace that comes when Jesus returns. That is what Isaiah is pointing to, and that is what our hope is rooted in. Right? It is the nature of Advent to wait, and it is important to be clear what it is that we are waiting for. Right? It is one thing to be waiting for, like, Casey's to finish making your pizza. Like, that's not the waiting of Advent. It's not waiting for a TV show to come on. It is to be people who are waiting for something that matters so much that we stop and simply pay attention to what we're looking towards every single year at this time of year, and these weeks running up to Christmas. We are waiting for something, and what we're waiting for is not that Christ has come, which is wonderful. We're not waiting just that Christ has come now, but we are also waiting for Christ will come again. That we're waiting for this because we are not capable of doing it ourselves. It is a gift that Christ will come again. There are things that we simply are in the middle of that we cannot change, and we look. We're in a very odd way. It's kind of like we're Britons. We're British in like the 8th century. It's been 400 years since toilets were in Britain, and it's going to be another over multiple centuries before toilets will come back. And there's nothing we could do about it. We just have to wait and know that it will happen. Or in the same way that the Davidic kings became lost, they ceased to be faithful, and the kingdom of Israel looked down the road for when the Davidic king will return. Like, that we are in a time of waiting where it's not something we can make happen faster. This is a time to observe that we are waiting, and that God is going to make that peace when the Prince of Peace comes again. It's going to happen, but it's not going to happen on our timeline. It's going to happen when God does it, because God is going to be the one that does it, right? So, if you're wondering, plumbing, keep on coming back with plumbing with this sermon, right? If you've ever wondered, will there be toilets in heaven? Probably. I mean, we will have bodies in heaven. We'll eat in heaven. And so, like, yes, there probably will be toilets. But it's not, they won't happen because we're amazing. They'll happen because God is good, and that's how community is meant to live together. And far more importantly, the question for us is, will we be at peace with everyone else who follows Jesus when we get to heaven? And the answer is yes, we will be. There is no one who follows Jesus that we will not see as a brother or a sister. Right? We're going to get to the place where we are at peace with all of the children of God. And we'll get there not because of anything we do, but we'll get there because of what God has done, is doing, and will do when God comes again, when Jesus comes again. The stump of Jesse, the fruit that comes from that tree, will be for the healing of the nations, will change the world, bring it peace. That's what we wait for. Thanks be to God. Amen.